Hello, my name is Callon, otherwise known as Joshua T. Stuard. I am the director, co-founder, and creator of NIGHT.wav Productions, and I would love to invite you all to join me as I welcome you to the Nightfall. Dun dun dun! Hey everyone, how are we doing today? So today's episode of Welcome to Nightfall is the Dyatlov Pass case. I want to apologize for us not coming on last night. Unfortunately, schedules have been kind of hectic with classes, games, as well as just so many people get together to do these episodes. So, yeah. So tonight's episode is gonna just be me by the looks of it. Everyone else is pretty much scheduling their own thing right now. I guess it's important to them to allow me to fill their heads with nightmares of the strange, dark, and mysterious. Speaking of the strange, dark, and mysterious, I would like to give a good shout out to another member of the true crime podcasting community. With a big, great welcome to Mr. Ballen, the YouTuber who recently hit over 1 million subscribers and has started creating podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all your other local wherever you listen to podcasts. His new podcast called Mr. Ballen, Strange, Dark, and Mysterious Stories, is now available on Spotify, where you can listen to all 3 of the new episodes, including 2 brand new stories that you didn't hear on YouTube, as well as an extended cut version of one of his more popular videos that just released today. Mr. Ballen's podcast is available on all platforms that you would get your podcasting from, except for YouTube, because obviously he needs to have some revenue for his YouTube channel. And I just wanted to give him a nice shout out because he's one of the reasons why I wanted to do the show in the first place, since his stories are both nightmarish and amazing at the same time. So a little bit of background info on the Dyatlov Pass case. First off, the Dyatlov Pass case took place in the Ural Mountains in Russia, which means there's going to be some Russian names that I'm going to have a little bit of problem pronouncing. I know people can barely understand me as is, but this is what I would hope be turning to my job eventually. So I want to make sure that people hear and understand as best as they can. So without further ado, a little bit more background on Dyatlov Pass. So United hikers went up into the mountains up into the Ural Mountains in 1959. And went missing when family went out, family and friends and the government went out to find them. They found their bodies in mysterious circumstances. This is another unsolved case, and the reason it is considered unsolved is because we don't know what led to their downfall, their deaths. All we know is what happened after their deaths. So, without further ado, let's get started. In 1959, a group was formed for a skiing expedition across the northern Ural Mountains in Sverdlovsk Oblast, Soviet Union. According to prosecutor Tempelov, documents that were found in the tent of the expedition suggest that the expedition was named for the 21st Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and was probably dispatched by a local Komsomol organization. Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnical Institute, now known as the Ural Federal University, was the leader who assembled a group of 9 others for the trip, most of whom were fellow students and peers at the university. Each member of the group, which consisted of 8 men and 2 women, was an experienced Grade 2 hiker with ski tour experience and would be receiving Grade 3 certification upon their return. So it's important to note that each and every single one of these hikers were skilled enough to be able to find their way back and know exactly how to handle uh, terrible situations. They were skilled and they knew the area well. At the time, this was the highest certification available in the Soviet Union and required candidates to traverse 300 kilometers. Otherwise, in America, that would be 190 miles. The route was designed by Dyatlov's group to reach the far northern regions of Oblast and the upper streams of the Lozva River. The route was approved by the Sverdlovsk City Route Commission. This was a division of the Sverdlovsk Committee of Physical Culture and Sport, and they confirmed the group of 10 people on January 8th, 1959. The goal of the expedition was to reach Ordorkan, a mountain 10 kilometers, 6.2 miles north of the site where the incident occurred. This route, undertaken in February, was estimated as a Category 3, the most difficult time to traverse. So it's so at this point, it should be well known and well understood that the hikers were all very experienced with traversing the terrain, but they were also walking into a situation where it would have been the most dangerous time for them to traverse this area. On January 23rd, 1959, the Dyatlov Group was issued their route book, which listed their course as following the number 5 trail. At the time, the Sverdlov City Committee of Physical Culture and Sport listed approval for 11 people. The 11th person listed was Semyon Zolotaryov, who was previously certified to go with another expedition of similar difficulty, the Stalkering Expedition Group. The Dyatlov Group left the Sverdlov City on the same day they received the route book. So let me explain let me give you guys the names of all the hikers and members of the group. You have Igor Dyatlov, age 23. You have Yuri Doroshenko, age 21. You have Ludmila Dubanina, age 20, female. We have Georgy and Yuri Krivenshenko, age 23. Alexander Kolyakov, age 24. Zinaida Kolmogorova, age 22, female. Rustem Slobodan, age 23. Nikolai W. Renault, age 23. Semyon Zolotaryov, age 28. And Yuri Yugan, age 21. So now we're going to get into the main expedition. The group arrived by train at Evdel, a town at the center of the northern province of Sverdlovsk Oblast, in the early morning hours of January 25th, 1959. They then took a truck to Vizhai, a Lori village that is the last inhabited settlement to the north. While spending the night at Vizhai, the skiers purchased and ate loaves of bread to keep their energy levels up for the following day's hike. On January 27th, they began their trek towards Gora Gorkin. On January 28th, one member, Yuri Yugan, who suffered from several health ailments, including rheumatism and a congenital heart defect, turned back due to knee and joint pain that made him unable to continue the hike. The remaining 9 hikers continued the trek. Yuri Yugen is considered the only member of the Dyatlov Pass group to survive. Diaries and cameras found around their last campsite made it possible to track the group's route up to the day preceding the incident. On 31st January, the group arrived at the edge of a highland area and began to prepare for climbing. In Wooded Valley, they carried surplus food and equipment that would be uh, used for the trip back. The next day, the hikers started to move through the pass. It had seemed they planned to get over the pass and make camp for the next night on the opposite side, but because of worsening weather conditions, such as snowstorms and decreasing visibility, they lost their direction and deviated west toward the top of Callon, Seattle. When they realized their mistake, the group decided to set up camp there on slope of the mountain rather than move 1.5 kilometers or 0.93 miles downhill to a forested area that would have offered some shelter from the weather. Ewing speculated that Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the altitude they had gained, or he decided to practice camping on the mountain slope. Guys, the last known location of them before the search begins. Before leaving, Dyatlov had agreed he would send a telegram to their sports club as soon as the group returned to Visay. It was expected that this would happen no later than February 12th, but Dyatlov had told Ewan before he departed the group that he expected it to be longer. When the 12th passed and no messages had been received, there was no immediate reaction, as delays of a few days were common with such expeditions. On February 20th, the travelers' relatives demanded a rescue operation, and the head of the institute sent the first rescue groups, consisting of volunteer students and teachers. Later, the army and militia, the police, forces became involved, with planes and helicopters ordered to join the operation. On February 26th, the searchers found the group's abandoned and badly damaged tent on Callon, Seattle. The campsite baffled the search party. Mikhail Sharavan, the student who found the tent, said the tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty, and all of the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind. Investigators said the tent had been cut open from inside. 9 of the sets of footprints, left by people wearing only socks or a single shoe or even barefoot, could be followed, leading down to the edge of a nearby wood on the opposite side of the pass. The image that you see on screen right now, that is in fact the tent that was found on the slope of the mountain. You can see snow on top of it. You can see how it was collapsed. So on and so forth. Uh, Alright, so let me repeat. 9 sets of footprints left by people wearing only socks or a single shoe or even barefoot could be followed, leading down to the edge of a nearby wood on the opposite side of the pass, 1.5 kilometers or 90.93 miles to the northeast of the campsite. After 500 meters or 1,600 feet, these tracks were covered with snow. At the forest's edge, under a large Siberian pine, the searchers found the visible remains of a small fire. There they found the first 2 bodies, those of Krivolyashenko and Doroshenko, shoeless and dressed only in underwear. The branches on the tree were broken up to 5 meters high, suggesting that one of the skiers had climbed up to look for something, perhaps the camp. Between the pine and the camp, the searchers found 3 more corpses: Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Swobodan, who died in poses suggesting that they were attempting to return to the tent. They were found at distances of 300, 480, and 630 meters, which is 980, 1570, and 2070 feet from the tree. Finding the remaining 4 travelers took more than 2 months. They were finally found on May 4th under 4 meters of snow, and ravine 75 meters, 246 feet, further into the woods from the pine tree. 3 of the 4 were better dressing than the others, and there were signs that some clothing of those who had died first had been removed for use by the others. Yamagina was wearing Krivonashenko's burned, torn trousers, and her left foot and shin were wrapped in a torn jacket. And that's the end of that. So now we're going to get into the investigation. A legal inquest started immediately after the first 5 bodies were found. A medical examination found no injuries that might have led to their deaths, and it was concluded that they had all died of hypothermia. Swoboden had a small crack in his skull, but was not thought to have been a fatal wound. An examination of the 4 bodies found in May shifted the narrative of the incident. 3 of the hikers had fatal injuries. Typical Brignol had major skull damage, and Duanina and Zolotaryov had major chest fractures. According to Boris Bolsroy's study, the force required to cause such damage would have been extremely high, comparable to that of a car crash. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds associated with bone fractures, as if they had been subjected to a high level of pressure. All 4 bodies found at the bottom of the creek in a running stream of water had soft tissue damage to their head and face. For example, Yuvanina was missing her tongue, eyes, part of her lips, as well as facial tissue and a fragment of skull bone, while Zolotaryov had his eyeballs missing, and Alexander Kolyatov was missing his eyebrows. V.A. Voshroysky, the forensic expert performing the post-mortem examination, judged that these injuries happened post-mortem due to the location of the bodies and extreme. There was initial speculation that the indigenous Mansi people, reindeer herders local to the area, had attacked and murdered the group for encroaching upon their lands. Several Mansi were interrogated, but the investigation indicated that the nature of the deaths did not support this hypothesis. Only the hikers' footprints were visible, and they showed no sign of hand-to-hand struggle. Although the temperature was very low, around negative 25 to negative 30 degrees Celsius, or negative 13 to negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, with the storm blowing, the dead were only partially dressed. Some had only one shoe, while others wore only socks. Some were found wrapped in snips and ripped clothes that seemed to have been cut from those who were already dead. Journalists reporting on the available parts of the inquest files claimed that it states 6 of the group members died of hypothermia and 3 of fatal injuries. There were no indications of other people nearby on Kholat Syakhl apart from the 9 travelers. The tent had been ripped open from within. The victims had died 6-8 hours after their last meal. Traces from the camp show that all group members left the campsite of their own accord on foot. Some levels of radiation were found on one of the victims' clothing. To dispel the theory of an attack by indigenous Mansi people, Voshroysky stated that the fatal injuries of 3 bodies could not have been caused by human beings, because the force of the blows had been too strong and no soft tissue had been damaged. Released documents contain no information about the condition of the seer's internal organs, and obviously there were no survivors, unless you count Yuri Yugen. At the time, the official conclusion was that the group members had died because of a compelling natural force. That is a direct quote from the file. Direct natural force. Compelling natural force. The inquest officially ceased in May 1959 as a result of the absence of a guilty party. The files were sent to a secret archive. In 1997, it was revealed that the negatives from Krivonashenko's camera were kept in the private archive of one of the investigators, Lev Ivanov. Ivanov. The film material was donated by Ivanov's daughter to the Dyatlov Foundation. The diaries of a hiking party fell into Russia's public domain in 2009. On April 12, 2018, Zolotaryev's remains were exhumed on the initiative of journalists of the Russian tabloid newspaper, long name Pravda. Contradictory results were obtained. One of the experts said that the character of the injuries resembled a person knocked down by a car, and the DNA analysis did not reveal any similarity to the DNA of living relatives. In addition, it turned out that Zoltaryev's name was on the list of those buried at the Ivanovsky Cemetery. Nevertheless, the reconstruction of the face from the exhumed skull matched post-war photographs of Zolotaryev, although journalists expressed suspicions that another person was hiding under Zolotaryev's name after World War II. In February 2019, Russian authorities reopened an investigation into the incident. Although only 3 possible explanations were being considered: an avalanche, a slab avalanche, or a hurricane, the possibility of a crime had been discounted. And that's pretty much all the information that we got for this. So, I'm going to go into a little bit of my own theories and talking about this a little bit. So, Dyatlov Pass has been an interesting case for many years because no one really knows what caused the 9 hikers to abandon their tent, as well as their belongings, as well as run out into the wilderness in the middle of the night, buck naked. It's a confusing story. Not many people really realize exactly what happened to the people that happened to the people that were there. But because of this, a lot of different theories have been drawn. So let's look at a few theories. There were some reports, actually, first there were some additional reports made by people in the area. 12-year-old boy Yuri Kuntsevich, who later became the head of the Yekaterinburg-based Dyatlov Foundation, attended 5 of the hikers' funerals. He recalled that their skin had a deep brown tan. Another group of hikers, about 50 kilometers or 31 miles south of the incident, reported that they saw strange orange spheres in the sky to the north on the night of the incident. Similar spheres were observed by IFGEL in adjacent areas, continuing during the period from February to March 1959 by various independent witnesses, including the Meteorology Service and the military. These sightings were not noted in the 1959 investigation, and various witnesses came forward years later. So yes, there was a report that maybe, just maybe, it was aliens. I don't really believe that, but I mean, it's just what's there. So let's go into some of the explanations. The first and most popular theory is an avalanche. At the time, a lot of people believed that. At the time, a lot of people had initially suspected an avalanche, but it was immediately ruled out because of the state of the camp as well as the state of the bodies. A lot of people believe that it was quite possibly a case of foul play due to foul play or nature coming to attack them in the form of a bear or another predator out in the wild, which would have attacked their tent and so on and so forth. The position of the bodies, them all having been in several areas, as well as some of the bodies being found months later under snow, implies that an avalanche has separated the group, and because of the snowstorm, it may have been harder for the group members to be able to find their camp, as well as high probability and possibility of snow covering your tent, making it even harder at night. So here's that theory. However, the most, however, uh, however, in 2019 and 2020, a very special investigation was occurred. Was hold on a moment. Yeah. In 2021, a team of physicists and engineers led by Alexander Ploutrin and Johann Gaume published in Communications, Earth, and Environment a new model that demonstrated how even a remotely small-sized snow slab on the Callon slope could cause tent damage and injuries consistent with those suffered by the guy at Loft Team, though it is kind of hard to dispute that. At the moment, it's also interesting to think that this model, a little side note, the model that they're talking about um, was actually inspired by an investigator who watched the Disney movie Frozen. According to the investigator, he noted that the snow effects in the Dyatlov Pass, well, actually, in the in the movie Frozen, were so realistic to how uh how it was in real life that he went out to the animators and asked for their help in creating a new model for the Dyatlov Pass investigation, which eventually led to an investigation that straight up says that the true cause of death for uh, the Dyatlov crew is the avalanche theory. However, this again has been disputed. So here are some of the dispute, some of the uh, contradicting evidence. The location of the incident did not have any obvious signs of an avalanche having taken place. An avalanche would have left certain patterns and debris distributed over a wide area. The bodies found within a month of the event were covered with a very shallow layer of snow, and had there been an avalanche of sufficient strength to sweep away the second party, these bodies would have been swept away as well. This would have caused more serious and different injuries in the process and would have damaged the tree line. Over 100 expeditions in the region have been held since the incident, and none of them have ever reported conditions that might create an avalanche. A study of the area using up-to-date terrain-related physics revealed that the location was entirely unlikely for such an avalanche to have occurred. The dangerous conditions, quote, found in another nearby area, which had significantly steeper slopes and cornices, were observed in April and May when the snowfalls of winter were melting. During February, when the incident occurred, there was no such conditions. Analysis of the terrain and the slope showed that even if there could have been a very specific avalanche that found its way into the area, its path would have gone past the tent. The tent had collapsed from the side, but not in the horizontal direction. Dyatlov was an experienced skier, and the much older Zolotaryov was studying for his master's certificate in ski instruction and mountain hiking. Neither of these two men would have been likely to camp anywhere in the path of a potential avalanche. And footprint patterns leading away from the tent were inconsistent with someone, let alone a group of 9 people, running in panic from either real or imagined danger. All the footprints leading away from the tent and towards the woods were consistent with individuals who were walking at a normal pace. So there are major contradictions to the idea of an avalanche. Uh, however, current investigations do believe that a form of an avalanche could have caused their demise. So moving on to the next one. There is also another nature-based theory called Kagabagic Wind. In 2019, a Swedish Russian expedition was made to the site, and after investigations, they proposed that a violent Kagabagic wind was a plausible explanation for the incident. Kagabagic winds are somewhat rare events that can be extremely violent. They were implicated in a 1978 case at Ural Mountains in Sweden, where 8 hikers were killed and 1 was severely injured in the aftermath of a Kagabatic wind. So to explain what a Kagabatic wind is a drainage wind, a wind that carries high density air from a higher elevation down a slope under the force of gravity. Such winds are sometimes also called fall winds. The spelling Kagabatic winds is also used. Kagabatic winds can rush down elevated slopes at hurricane speeds, but most are not that intense, and many are 10 knots, 18 kilometers per hour or less. So in other words, Kagabatic wind is like a solid wall of air coming down and hitting you directly in the chest. So a sudden Kagabatic wind would have made it impossible to remain in the tent, and the most rational course of action would have been for the hikers to cover the tent with snow and seek shelter behind the tree line. On top of the tent, there was also a torch left turned on, possibly left there intentionally so that the hikers could find their way back to the tent once the wind subsided. The expedition proposed that the group of hikers constructed 2 bivouac shelters, bivouac shelters, one of which collapsed, leaving 4 of hikers buried with the severe injuries observed. There's no real contradicting evidence to this, but it's also a weak theory at best. Infrasound. So to explain what infrasound is a specific frequency that is used primarily in horror and thriller films to create a sense of unease within the body. It is a physical frequency that will make you feel uneasy in order to make you more susceptible to scary stories and scary visuals. Now, infrasound could have been heard on the Dyatlov Pass, making the members of the Dyatlov team very paranoid, which would explain their initial decision to run away from the tent, or at least to leave the tent in the middle of the night due to a shared delusion, otherwise known as folly ague. It isn't very likely to have happened, but some people posit that the area around nature, because of the winds and the storm, create a sound, create just the right frequency to create infrasound to make them uneasy. Though it's a very weak theory due to infrasound not having a record of causing people to be that uneasy to drive them over the edge to the point of running out of tanks, buck naked with only socks and a shoe on. Then there is one final major theory, is that military tests in the area were conducted, or the KGB were sent out to take care of the take care of them. In one speculation, the campsite fell within the path of a Soviet parachute mine exercise. This theory alleges that the hikers, woken by loud explosions, fled the tent in a shoeless panic and found themselves unable to return for supply retrieval. After some members rose together attempting to endure the bombardment, others commandeered their clothing, only to be fatally injured by subsequent parachute mine concussions. There are indeed records of parachute mines being tested by the Soviet military in the area around the time when the hikers were there. Parachute mines detonate while still in the air, rather than upon striking Earth's surface and produce signature injuries similar to those experienced by the hikers, having internal damage with relatively little external trauma. The theory coincides with reported sightings of glowing orange orbs glowing or falling in the sky within the general vicinity of the hikers and allegedly photographed by them, potentially military aircraft or descending parachute mines. His theory, among others, uses scavenging animals to explain Ewing's injuries. Some speculate that the bodies were unnaturally manipulated on the basis of characteristic liver mortis markings discovered during an autopsy, as well as burns to hair and skin. Well, Jesus Christ. Photographs of the tent allegedly show that it was erected incorrectly, something the experienced hikers were unlikely to have done. A similar theory alleges the testing of radiological weapons is based partly on the discovery of radioactivity on some of the clothing, as well as the descriptions of the bodies by relatives as having orange skin and gray hair. However, radioactive dispersal would have affected all, not just some, of the hikers' equipment, and the skin and hair discoloration can be explained by a natural process of mummification after 3 months of exposure to the cold and wind. The initial suppression by Soviet authorities of files describing this group's disappearance is sometimes mentioned as evidence of a cover-up. The concealment of information about domestic incidents was standard procedure in the USSR and thus far from peculiar. And by the late 1980s, all Dyatlov Pass files had been released in some manner. And that's about it on the Dyatlov Pass case. A lot of interesting theories, a lot of interesting questions. Again, this case is considered unsolved because no one knows what led to the hikers all abandoning their tent. If you ask me, I think I think any combination of these would have made sense. For example, a combination of the uh, infrasound of the katabatic wind, and maybe falling a dew. To explain what falling a dew is, basically it's a shared delusion. It's when one person has a delusion and suddenly people in the general vicinity who are either relatives or closely related friends are considered all suffer from the same delusion, which would explain why most members of the team ran out of the tent in delusion. Maybe some uh, ran out of the tent and the others went out to follow them, and which eventually led to some of the injuries and locations where they were found. So it is entirely likely that any one of these theories is probable and plausible and possible, but it is also unlikely that any of them are definitive evidence. As such, uh, as such, the the story has been considered one of the more notable true crime cases in the world. It's one of the more popular cases, and in fact, we are going to be touching on a very similar case later on this year. Uh, also brought on by also inspired by a video that I watched uh, called "The Russian Death March." If you would like to watch a little bit of that, uh, just look up the Russian Death March and Mr. Ballen, who I mentioned at the top of the show. Mr. Ballen's podcast is available on Spotify and everything. But if you would like to listen to some of his stories, please look up at Mr. Ballen, that is Ballen on YouTube, and you can find some of the more horrifying and interesting and mysterious cases to ever be discussed on YouTube, including the Russian Death March, Dyatlov Pass, Henter Kaifek, and some of the other ones that we are going to be talking about later on this year. I would like to thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Welcome to the Nightfall. I believe that this episode has been one of the better ones, more or less. And, unfortunately, I've been having to do it myself for the past couple of weeks, and because of certain scheduling conflicts, hopefully this is the last episode of the Welcome to the Nightfall series, in which I will have to read directly from Wikipedia. In case you didn't know, I've been reading directly from Wikipedia on this entire episode, word for word, due to some inconsistencies with scheduling with the person who's supposed to be writing my notes. Unfortunately, they've been busy, and I didn't have enough time to actually finish writing my notes today, so I just decided to say screw it and use the Wikipedia article. Wikipedia article also includes a bunch of different information, as well as more extensive information on some of the theories that I didn't get into. If you would like to learn more about NIGHT.wav Productions and who we are, please follow us on Twitter at NIGHT.wav Podcast. Check out one of our other shows, the Satellite Pod on Satellite The Message on Twitter at the Satellite Pod, in which you will find the links to our Google podcast and our Spotify channel for the Satellite. You can follow me on Twitter at Callon Official, also on screen. And tuning in next Monday on let me see what next Monday is. This Sunday. Next Monday is President's Day. So next Monday, tune in to listen to Through the Reach, episode 4, when we talk about giant monster movies. It's kaiju, such as Godzilla, King Kong, all of them. Join us next Wednesday on February 23rd, when we talk about another true crime case. Let me make sure I know which one I'm talking about before I say something that is completely and totally incorrect. I think I have my list somewhere around here. Give me one moment, guys. If I remember correctly, the next episode is I know what episode 5 is going to be. I'm sorry, guys. I truly am. I promise you, I will have this worked out by next week. So, scrolling up. Okay. Oh, yes. The leg mask case. A very interesting supernatural and true crime element podcast, which I think you guys will all personally enjoy once we get into it. And also, tune in next Friday on Spotify and Google Podcasts when frequent flyer Mac Advertisement interviews a great musician from all the way out in Germany for the series premiere of Steel Casket Underground. That's gonna do it for all of us tonight. Again, follow us on Twitter at NIGHT.wav Podcast at